Welcome to The Good Life here on WHUS Stores 91.7. I'm your co-host, Hillary Greer, here with Phoebe Godfrey, and today we're interviewing Bill Morgan. Bill is a longtime Mansfield resident, has lived here for 40 years, and had a business in Willimantic. He is a father and a grandfather and a member of St. Mark's Episcopal Chapel, the church that is near and dear to my heart as the priest at St. Mark's. And Bill is here to share with us some of his life learnings about the good life, and in particular, about the meaning of forgiveness and what that teaches us in our lives. So welcome, Bill.
Bill, it's very nice to have you. Thank you so much for coming. So the trend that Hillary and I have been using is to have people kind of situate themselves for our audience in terms of values that you had growing up, people in your childhood that may have influenced the way you came to think about the good life in terms of virtues and meanings and choices that you have made.
Well, I was very fortunate to have had extremely supportive father and my mother, although my father was more supportive, and the values and the standards that they instilled in me have withstood the test of time, and I've really embellished all of those and have been really the backbone of my career, not only personally but from a business relationship point of view. I grew up in a town west of Boston, and my father worked for the Aetna Casualty and Surety Company for 40 years in Boston, and I can always remember running down to the street sign and waiting for him to come home, you know. Yeah. And I've told Hillary that I think the standards and values that were instilled in me kind of made me feel as if God was my conscience many times. And but when I was growing up, also the work ethic that my father instilled in me was I can remember shoveling snow people's driveways when I was 7 years old, and I had a newspaper route, and I got 35 cents a week, and that was a big deal, you know. A little cold, but then he would get these Christmas cards wholesale in Boston, and I would go and knock on doors when I was 10 years old selling Christmas cards. But the point of that is that the one lesson he told me, and I have used this my whole life, and it's been very, very beneficial, is that he said, when you go to the door, expect the person to say no. In other words, keep the bar nice and low. And I've used that, you know, if I go in and buy something, I always say, well, gee, can you do a little better, you know? And invariably, they can. And my theory is the worst anyone can say is no.
Is no.
You know, and if you condition yourself for that. So, and as I say, when all the sports activities that I had when I was growing up were very, very supportive. And I was telling Hillary, I was involved with the Congregational Church as a youngster, and then the Pilgrim Fellowship for 3 years. And at that point, I thought maybe I would go into the ministry, but I said, well, I'll go off to college and see if my calling is still there, and it was not. So, which was fine, and so I think that, and it was at the time I went to this conference in Chicago where the Pilgrim Fellowship of the Congregational Church and the Pilgrim Fellowship of the other church that was merged. And it was a very meaningful and nice experience. Met a lot of nice people as a result of it. But
so when the values of hard work and and you mentioned for your family the concept of God or the reality of God for you, can you give us a little more nuance to those values and how they perhaps played out in terms of relationships to economic inequality, or were there aspects? I mean, I know Boston has an interesting history in terms of racial inequality, and how were those dealt with in your family that perhaps you learned from or grew out of?
Well, I would say I was born in 41, so back in the 40s and the early 50s, I would say my parents were very prejudiced, and it was a struggle for me to deal with those prejudices later on in life and to try to eradicate them from my thinking. And I think and from a religious point of view, I've been able to deal with that inequality and try to treat everyone equally. And certainly from a business point of view, when I was working in Willimantic, we were all of us, the three of us that ran the agency, and there were 20 of us in the agency, that part of the job was to reach out to other people and to get involved in extracurricular activities. And it was very, very beneficial. I mean, you're helping. I think our mission in life certainly is outside of the church, and that is to be compassionate and kind to other people. And when you get involved in these extracurricular activities, in the hospital and lots of other places, that sure there was something in it for me, but there was more reward for me in helping other people. And I think that church background from which I came, because I did go to Sunday school every week, even though my mother would say, "Oh, Billy, it's time to get up." Oh, no, I don't. But I did go, and so I think that definitely helped in trying to do what is right. It's the right thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think that we were fortunate in when I worked in Willimantic, is to treat our clients on that basis of doing what was right for them, not what was right for our pocketbook. And so we developed a nice trust and relationship. At that time, insurance was not as commoditized as it is today.
It was more personal.
Yes, it was. And it was very, so I felt fortunate because I'm a very people-oriented person, and it was nice to develop that relationship and have that trust. And we represented seven or eight different companies, so we would always search the market and try to get the best.
I think it's interesting, when you say, your parents were very prejudiced, and that, when we look at the history of the United States, if you were raised as a white person at that time, and even today, there are conditionings which sort of predispose whites to prejudice. But I think it's interesting for you to say, that you worked on changing your thinking, and how that kind of is going to link to the next topic that I know Hillary wants to ask you about, in terms of, paving the way daily for a more compassionate life, right? That it's not something that you wake up one day and you're like, oh, I'm no longer going to be racist, or I'm no longer going to be prejudiced towards, low income people, or whatever. It's like, it's something you have to sort of work on and be mindful in daily habits that then enable you later on to be like, oh, I can let go of something because I've been working on it.
And you have to work at it.
Yeah.
I mean, Willimantic is, a potpourri of 12 different ethnic groups. And it was funny, when we first came to town, we went to a local church. I'm not, no sense making any names, but the question always was, now what department are you in? So we were townies, considered townies. So my wife and I decided, all right. So we then went to St. Paul's Episcopal Church in Willimantic, figuring that would be a lot more realistic exposure for our children, so that it wouldn't be, because Mansfield schools were pretty stereotyped as well, but going to Willimantic and having that exposure to different nationalities and was, I think, very, very helpful, not only for us, but primarily for our children.
And I think that's a really key point in this, and when I hear in your story, that opening ourselves to people who are different from us and to something beyond our experience and something beyond what we're taught enriches us. It's not just something we do for other people because we're such wonderful people, but it's something that contributes to our lives and opens our perspective and opens our world when we're open to the diversity that's around us. In both the wonderful parts of it and the real justice issues that it presents.
And at the time, I think the Covenant Soup Kitchen was just getting started, so that was another great exposure for our kids to see, to learn to reach out to other people.
That's great.
So you're listening to The Good Life on WHUS 91.7, and I'm Phoebe Godfrey here with my co-host Hillary Greer, and we're talking with Bill Morgan, and he's sharing with us part of his journey in terms of how he was raised and how he has come to see gaining compassion and the path to forgiveness is one that we work on a daily basis.
Yes.
So Bill, you had built this life for yourself here in Mansfield, where you lived out the values you were taught of hard work and a lot of persistence and determination and caring for the people that you're working with and for. And then one day your life changed really drastically when your daughter Deb was killed in a car accident. Can you talk a bit about the journey that you went through after her death to find a space of compassion and openness towards the man who was driving that other car that killed her?
Yes, obviously it was a very traumatic experience for, we had 2 other children as well, and it's somewhat a little difficult to talk about it, but in any event, I think the driver of the car went through a red light. He was blinded by the sun. It was in October, so heading east is an issue. And her fiance, Deb, was 26 years old at the time, and she was fortunately the happiest she's ever been because she had just gotten engaged to this teddy bear of a guy, and they were living together, and she came to us and wanted to know if it was okay, if they lived together. And we said, sure, go ahead. And so that time was very, very difficult to handle. And we'd get calls from, different people looking for, we want to take pictures of that. And I said, no, we're not doing any of that. I said, it was just something that I just wanted to eradicate, and so we brought the kids back home, and so Tom, I can remember the first thing I said when the gal from the hospital called and said, "Can you come into the hospital?" She didn't tell us what had happened, and I said, "Is Tom all right?" And she said, "Well, yes." And then that was all she said. So anyway, Tom was her fiance, and Deb was killed, and we donated all her organs, and that was one of the most, because Deb and I had talked about that, and she was 26 years old, and obviously her organs were in great shape, and certainly, and Hartford Hospital was just wonderful. They kept in touch with us the whole time, for a year's period of time, and they donated her eyes and her veins and her heart, and when you'd hear back and from the recipients, it was just mind-boggling, and it was just so gratifying, because that's certainly what Deb would have wanted. And her fiance Tom, he and I got along very, very well. He was just a teddy bear of a guy, and so we would meet we had lunch probably once a month for 6 months, and then it was too much for him. He couldn't, I needed him, but he didn't need to be reminded of the incident. And so we parted and respected each other's position, and he went off and got married and had two girls. And every once in a while we would see him, because our grandchildren in Madison were in dance schools, and his children were in dance schools. So we came across them very, very superficially. And and then at that time, shortly thereafter, I started going. I had not been going to church, and then I started going to church a couple of times, and it was at St. Paul's in Willimantic, and I then parted company with in that regard from the church, and it took me a long time, probably 15, 16 years before I started going back to church, and then we went to. I was divorced and remarried, and we came to St. Mark's in Stores, and were just so impressed with Hillary and the compassion of the parishioners was just something we had not experienced. And I had debated for a long time whether or not I would contact the driver of the car, realizing it was an accident, but I was very upset because he didn't have the courtesy to even call shortly after the incident and ask how we were. I understand, the lawyer probably told him, don't call, don't do this. And don't. Had the situation been reversed, I would have called anyway and just said, how are you doing? And
It's a hard call to make, though.
I'm sure it was. Yeah. And we even went to, we had a hearing at the motor vehicle department, and he ended up with the accelerated rehabilitation, which was fine. And his sons came up to me and said, "Oh, my father's a good man." I said, "I know, but he could have at least called." So I was very angry. I was very upset. It took me a long time to get over that. And it wasn't till I started feeling the presence of God, which Hillary was very, very instrumental in providing that avenue for me, and listening to sermons. And I got very much involved with Marcus Borg, who was an author of a book who has a metaphorical interpretation of the Bible, and it made a lot more sense to me than the factual and literal. And so I canvassed our children, and I said, I'm thinking about calling this man or writing him and just finding out, just letting him know that I forgive him, and I realized it was an accident, and my religious orientation at this point has enabled me to do this. Well, one of our children, "Oh, no, don't do that, that's not a good thing." And Hillary, of course, encouraged me to do it. And we were able to, our son and daughter-in-law managed to run him down to find out where he was, and it turned out he was in an adjacent town. So I wrote him a letter, a very, very short letter, and just explained as I just explained to you. And I said, "I do not expect you to call me," I said, "or contact me at all." I said, "My writing this was enough for me to get it out of my system, that I felt I needed to do this in the Spirit of God and to help in compassion for others." He called me within 2 days, and it was just we spoke for an hour, and he thanked me profusely, at least 5 or 6 times for calling. And he said, I debated many times calling you myself. And he said that I wanted to, but he said I didn't know what reaction. And I figured I'm safe. I'm sending him a letter, and did not expect him to call or return the call. But anyway, he said, he said, "I think of it every single day," and I felt so sorry. And it took me 21 years to get to that point, and I felt badly. I really did.
I think something that your story makes me think of is, the theme of our show in terms of the good life. And, we often assume that the good life means nothing bad happens to you, right? That you get what you want, and you get the future that you always imagined, and your children live forever and you live forever. And, and it's like that's not it, right?
That's
and,
not reality.
That's not reality, but also, bad things do happen. To good people, to bad people, to all of us. The question is, what is the intelligence, the learning, the compassion, the wisdom that we bring when those things do happen that can help all of us grow from them,
absolutely.
right?
And I think you become much stronger once you've willing to bear that cross. That you are able to handle adversities in a much better, more positive fashion going forward. And it's almost like Marcus Borg's interpretation of the death and the resurrection. His question is, what needs to die and be reborn in a new way in your life? In other words, close the chapter, move on, and you can't change what has occurred. And you do grow from it. Absolutely.
And dying, and letting go. And, I'm not a follower of the Christian faith, but, I look to the cycles of the earth, and what needs to die, in order for spring to come. What need, the leaves need to drop off the tree, for the new growth to come. You need to prune, all the metaphors of the garden, or of the environment, that we look at that and we're like, it's all right there. And throughout the Bible are metaphors of the seeds, and and the mustard and this, and and it's like, we can just learn from everything around us that something's got to die, and sometimes it is someone, and
it is close to you.
Yeah.
And I mean, we're all confronted with that in one way or at some time or another, and we all deal with guilt, with not guilt, but the process of healing much differently. And I can remember our son, who was kind of a cold, fishy sort of a guy, and he came home from college, and I said to his sister, I said, if John doesn't cry, I said, we're in big trouble.
Yeah.
Because I mean, you need to release those feelings. And
Well, and I think one of the things that has always impressed me about you, Bill, is your capacity to continue to turn things over inside yourself and to look for new perspectives and new ways of meaning. And I think that really plays in with the cycles that we're talking about, because you are very willing to see this man who is driving the car, to see your daughter, to see yourself, to see your family in a new light, and that the things that have happened in our lives are not static, even when they've already happened, that we're constantly interpreting them in different ways, and that those are ways that can open us more. And there are also ways sometimes that can shut us down. And that cycle of death and rebirth is really a cycle of what do we need to let go of to become the people that we're committed to being.
I think that ability to be able to let go and move on is very, very difficult. I mean, and it varies. Everyone has a different method of grieving or time frame, and some never let go.
Yeah. You are listening to The Good Life here on 91.7 WHUS Stores. I'm Hillary Greer, here with co-host Phoebe Godfrey, and we're speaking today with Bill Morgan, who is a longtime Mansfield resident and Willimantic business owner, and also has been talking with us about his experience of coming to forgiveness and a more open and compassionate stance towards tragedy that's happened in his own life. We've reached the final segment of our program where we each sort of go around, and after this conversation together, we begin to reflect on what we have heard and what we're taking with us. So I'm curious, Bill, you've shared so much with us today. What is it that you're most present to, and what are you taking with you from this?
Well, I think the other thing that I did want to say about all of this, the accident, was that Tom was diagnosed with colon cancer last January.
And for the audience, just say who Tom is.
Oh,
again.
Tom was our daughter's fiance who was driving the car, and he was and I'll be very quick. He was diagnosed with colon cancer, and his new wife is just unbelievable. He got remarried, and so anyway, about 2 days before he passed, because he was in hospice, he told his brother that Deb is waiting for you in heaven. And I just thought that was such a remarkable thing for his wife, who obviously felt very confident in her own way. And it closed the chapter for us, because we see her now, and we never knew Tom's existing love, continuous love for Deb, but that was the final closure for us, and I think that it has made Sue and me and our family, our daughter and son, much stronger, having dealt, because we've been very open about this with our children, and I think we're, unfortunately it occurred, but I think we're stronger as a result of it, and I certainly am a lot more religiously oriented, and thank the good Lord for having given me the opportunity to see the compassion and kindness in other people. And I think that's what really stimulated me. And I try to, every night I go to sleep and try to remember 3 things for which I was grateful the prior day. And it just makes the glass half full and makes you more positive, and you look at people differently. And I think that's what I've taken away from all of this.
And for me, your story is affirming to my view that, compassion is a practice. It's a daily practice. That gratitude is a daily practice. And what we're practicing for is the letting go of life.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, all life is heading to loss.
Sooner or later.
One's own death,
Yeah.
the death of people we love, the death, and how do you handle those losses with grace, with even joy, right? In the sense that, I love that you said your daughter was her happiest, and recognizing that in many ways that was a complete life.
Oh, absolutely.
Right? And
Yeah.
and we always say, well, I want more. And it's like, that's it.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. That's all you get.
That's all you get. That's all we only get.
Yeah.
So much time. And if you can say I was really happy at one moment,
Well,
how beautiful.
Those happy memories are what kept me going.
How beautiful. Yeah.
And I think in any death, it's those pleasant memories, and because you can't change.
You can't
change it, and you just have to be thankful for those good times that you had together and recall them.
And the nice thing, we can all be happy in any moment if we open our hearts to that moment,
That's
whatever
right.
that moment is, whether it's a good or bad moment. That's regardless. It's sort of how do we experience that moment, and the last thing for me is I respect your faith and I respect Hillary's faith. I think sometimes we get stuck that we need a particular ex-faith to go through an experience, and I think it's possible to find the compassion and the forgiveness without a specific religion.
In,
and I
in
think,
any faith.
yeah, I think
we all love God,
yeah,
right? And it's just a manifestation.
It is, and
Definitely.
it's nice to have a pluralism of faiths, and in this culture where we recognize everybody sort of speaking the same language, just different names.
That's right. Yeah.
And I think it's such a reminder that your journey of forgiveness, and for all of us, is really about our commitment to how we're choosing to live our life. It's not being angry anymore. It's not that what happened doesn't matter, that doesn't make us sad, but it's a commitment of the kind of relationship and kind of compassion that we are committing ourselves to living our lives with. So thank you very much, Bill Morgan,
thank
for
you.
joining us.
Thank
It's
you.
been
Yeah,
wonderful
thank
having you here.
Thank you.
And this is Hillary Greer here with Phoebe Godfrey and Bill Morgan, wishing you a very good life.